Farming is a pastime most gamers would not be able to endure for a week, but oddly enough, it represents one of the most relaxing and profitable activities ever put to the digital medium. With Stardew Valley now officially the highest rated game on Steam, and quite deservedly so, I figured what better time to dig into the history of this beloved genre. What were the hits? What were the misses? And how has the farm RPG gone from indie darling to massive worldwide sensation? And most importantly, what's next? Come with me as we take a deep dive into the past, present, and future of farming RPGs. At the onset of their creation, video games were a means of escape from the physical world. Sure, the earliest game ever, Tennis for Two, was an imitation of a real-life game, and 15 years after its release in 1958, the world would go crazy over Pong, but in general, video games were considered an escape from the mundane. Whether you were an adventurer out in the jungles, a noble knight on a quest, or a spaceship blasting through hordes of aliens, game developers let their imaginations run wild and focused on creating fantastic experiences one would not normally deal with in real life. And this trend continues to this day. Adventurers gunning down enemies, knights fighting dragons, spaceships flying through space, all of these are concepts that have endured. Only these days, instead of buying a game and owning it, you can be nickel and dime to death with addictive microtransactions. Talk about innovation! The idea of putting a real-world, mundane activity into a video game was wholly absurd. Why would you ever want to farm in a video game when you could save the world or go on an epic quest? A full farming simulator with the elements in it that we recognize today would not come around until Harvest Moon was released for the Super Nintendo in 1996. However, some aspects we attribute to this genre began to crop up before this. Way back in 1968, the text-based game Hammurabi had you managing crop yields and building a village, while 1964's The Sumerian game had you growing a small city. While these were more akin to city-building games, the bare basics of farming were there, yet they lacked many of the elements we attribute to this genre. A game where you could harvest crops, interact with a community, customize your farm, and marry a sweet 8-bit hottie would not be a thing for decades. Hell, we didn't even get our first dating sim until the release of, and I'm absolutely gonna butcher this title, Nakayama Miho no Tokimeki High School in 1987. What were we supposed to do before then? Date real women? Ugh. It wasn't until 1996 that all these disparate systems were put into a single experience by a man that sought to replicate his childhood in digital form. Yasuhiro Wada grew up in the Japanese countryside, and he had the desire to make a game that reflected his experiences living a quaint, peaceful life. His early days were filled with foraging, tending to animals, and giving the same gift to girls every day for 2 years until they married him. Come on, Eve, take the damn flower, I want to marry you! Even though it released after Mario 64 and Mario Kart, a dedicated fan base flocked to the SNES Classic, and a franchise was born. This wasn't about some twink fighting a bunch of monsters or a plumber getting high on mushrooms. This was about real shit. You had to milk cows and till fields and do all the fun activities any child would love. While the subject matter of Harvest Moon may seem odd, the game was built around a gameplay loop that was highly addictive and found in other successful titles of the time, such as SimCity, Civilization, and The Sims. The game played out day after day, and the more you played, the larger your goals would become. Early on in the game, you would struggle to grow even a few different crops and make a meager living. However, as you learned more and got better gear, you could grow more crops, get more animals, and start to make more cash. It was this acceleration of progress that made the game so special, and when playing early Harvest Moon titles, I found myself constantly pushing to play for just one more in-game day. There was always something new to do, some new development that would make your farm bigger and better, and it was easy to play this game late into the night. I know watching this gameplay footage doesn't seem too revolutionary, but I would hazard a guess that the impact of Harvest Moon on the gaming landscape was absolutely massive. Games like Harvest Moon, SimCity, Roller Coaster Tycoon, and The Sims proved that there was an audience for a more thoughtful, laid-back type of gaming experience, and that audience would invest countless hours into a gameplay loop that empowered them the more they played. From Harvest Moon, we saw an entire web of new games come to the fore that may not have been made had it not been for this title. titles. Some of them were wildly successful, like Animal Crossing, which exchanged urgency for a happy-go-lucky experience centered around befriending lovable animals. Others were not so successful, like Lost in Blue, which saw you playing as two teenagers stuck on an island, and I think I'm literally the only person who ever played this title. The point is, Harvest Moon and its immediate sequels showed that games could be laid-back, slow experiences. Hell, it could even be argued that games like Minecraft and Farming Simulator wouldn't exist without it. The birth of the farming RPG had occurred, yet it was far from perfect. While Harvest Moon had a stranglehold on the genre, their games never really evolved substantially beyond the first title. Sure, Friends of Mineral Town in 2003 streamlined many systems and perfected the gameplay loop, but for every Friends of Mineral Town, there were many failed experiments. The Harvest Moon Game Boy titles were ugly and not user-friendly. Harvest Moon: A Wonderful Life moved at a snail's pace, and eventually this series began to be pumped out so quickly that the quality of each title diminished significantly. Sure, there were other games that took elements from Harvest Moon, but if you wanted that pure farming, foraging, and relationship building experience, you had one core option, and most of the time that option was rather subpar. As Harvest Moon games began to inundate GameStop discount bins, it seemed that, for a time at least, the farming sim had peaked. In the early 2000s, it seemed to be a relic of the past. Many of the newer titles lacked the core gameplay loop of earlier titles, and when the Wii brought in a whole audience of children to the gaming landscape, Harvest Moon dumbed itself down. It was a cuter, easier experience, and veterans of the series had nowhere to turn. While there were some imitators, it wasn't until one developer embarked on a project to revitalize the farm sim that we would get a farming experience that was not only as good as Harvest Moon, but far better. In 2013, the first trailer for Stardew Valley was released. This was a very different game from what we know and love today, and at the time, it was the very first game developed by this brand new developer. Every conventional piece of wisdom would argue that this game would be mediocre at best. After all, what can a solo dev with no game experience do that a massive established studio could not? As more time passed and Eric Barone began to release more trailers, it began to seem like Stardew Valley may be more than just a cheap imitation. Suddenly, the inventory system was more robust, the graphics became more polished, and the gameplay was a whole lot smoother. What started out looking like a replica was now beautiful and unique. I distinctly remember reading the feature list of this game and feeling like someone had read my mind about what I wanted in the perfect Harvest Moon game. There was huge customization, a grounded look and feel to the game, dozens of townspeople to meet or marry, and a bevy of other features that harkened back to what Harvest Moon initially promised so many years ago. Basically, this was what Harvest Moon originally promised back in 1996, before it went down a path of weird, casual bullshit. It seemed like this solo dev may make a solid entry into the farming sim series that was similar to what originally enticed gamers in this franchise. But little did we know that not only would Stardew Valley be a fantastic game, but it would redefine the series forevermore and launch the farming RPG into the mainstream. Picking up and playing Stardew Valley makes it apparent almost immediately why this game is such a huge hit. It absolutely perfected the gameplay cycle set forth in Harvest Moon, and added to it in ways that make this game one of the most addictive experiences of all time. In playing Stardew Valley, you can transform your little plot of dirt into any number of aesthetically pleasing or efficient layouts. You can customize everything from your character to your house to the town itself. The characters you meet are insanely well written and make you actively want to learn more about them. You can fish, farm, fight, and so much more. There is always something to do, and with a gorgeous presentation, it was clear this game was firing on all cylinders. Most importantly, it took the just one more turn gameplay loop that enticed players of titles like Civilization, SimCity, and the original Harvest Moon and perfected it. There is always something to work towards in Stardew Valley, and at the end of every in-game day, you are already planning out what to do for the next day, week, and month. month. Many games have this addicting cycle, but I would argue that Stardew Valley perfected it. Just as the original Harvest Moon proved that a farming RPG had appeal, so too did Stardew Valley prove that such a game could go mainstream. In its first year alone, Stardew Valley sold over 1 million copies, and today it stands at 41 million units sold. These are numbers that eclipse games like Call of Duty Modern Warfare, Halo, and Zelda Breath of the Wild. I cannot stress this enough. There are only a few figures in the history of gaming who can claim such sales as a solo dev. The rate of failure for solo devs is so ridiculously high that chances are if you embark on making a game by yourself, you will have a 99% chance of not even getting a fraction of the sales enjoyed by Stardew Valley. But Eric Barone tapped into something that was present in the minds of many gamers. He saw Harvest Moon as a truly enjoyable, albeit flawed, experience, and through his passion for this genre, he redefined it into the sensation it is today. The sensation of this game goes beyond Stardew Valley in and of itself. Whenever a new type of game comes around and makes a lot of money, there are bound to be imitators looking for their piece of the pie. When studios big and small saw the numbers Stardew Valley was producing, they wanted in on that. Farming RPGs, the most unassuming and unlikely genre out there, suddenly became mainstream, and the imitators started to pile up. Roots of Pacha, Coral Island, My Time at Portia, Littlewood, Dinkum. What the f is Dinkum? Every studio, whether it was the big hitters like Disney or small indie studios, started making games built around the gameplay loop perfected by Eric Barone. Stardew Valley but creepy, Stardew Valley but JRPG, Stardew Valley but Stardew Valley. Seriously, how did that last one not get sued? Those are like the same assets. But instead of distracting from Stardew Valley, this flood of farming sim games seemed only to enhance Stardew's popularity. Perfection for the genre had been attained, and everything else seemed like a cheap imitation. Oftentimes, people will try the imitators, enjoy them for a bit, but ultimately return to Stardew Valley because the imitators lack some crucial aspect of the formula Barone perfected. We're seeing studio after studio trying to capitalize on Stardew's success, but none have eclipsed the king of this genre. Most farming RPGs that come along seem to lack the same heart of their source material, and with Eric Barone constantly updating Stardew Valley for free, there's really no reason for most lovers of this genre to deviate from the GOAT. But why exactly is this game the greatest of the genre? The answer is simply this: passion. See, there's a big difference between someone making a game because they genuinely want to play it and a company making a game because they see dollar signs. It's really hard to capture the same spirit of a game made by a guy who earnestly just wants to have a good experience if you are simply trying to maximize profits. Eric Barone made the game that he wanted to play, and in interviews it seems that money was never really at the forefront of his mind. Oddly enough, this is precisely what has made him worth millions of dollars. Shit, if you want to maximize profits, don't make a farming game, just make a mobile game that preys on whales. I'm looking at you, China. Anyway, over a decade after the release of Stardew Valley, the farming RPG genre is kind of in an odd place right now. Many other games have swung at Stardew Valley, but none have been able to take its crown. However, farming RPGs are now completely mainstream. Nearly every event that announces games for a system is flooded with farm sim-like games, but with Stardew Valley still being updated, the game feels as new as ever. Eric Barone has stated that he plans to keep updating the game, and he's in no rush to release his next game, Haunted Chocolatier. I find this so fascinating because what he is doing is the antithesis of what traditional publishers believe leads to success. The idea these days is to release a crappy product, nickel and dime your user base, and abandon it for the next product as soon as possible. But Barone is challenging this by putting his focus exclusively on the quality and scope of his game, and gamers are responding positively to this player-focused approach. approach. Stardew Valley now sits as the highest rated game on Steam, and it's no surprise considering Eric's focus on quality over all else. The future for this genre is quite unknown right now. Eventually, Stardew Valley will be dethroned, and a new farming RPG experience will come along that is superior. But what form that will take and who it will come from is totally unknown. Maybe another solo dev with a passion for this type of game will pour years into a project that exhibits the same heart as Stardew Valley. Maybe a massive AAA studio will crack the code and make a farming RPG game with wide appeal. Hell, maybe one of the dozens of imitators will introduce some new and exciting flavor to this type of game that will draw in millions. Honestly, maybe the only person who can dethrone Stardew Valley is the man who put it there in the first place. The Stardew Valley audience will happily follow Eric Barone onto his next project, and though we don't know much about it, I'm positive his passion will produce another hit. While it's easy to chart the course of some genres, farming games are a bit of an enigma. The seeds of their success were sown very early, but a true farming RPG with mass appeal didn't hit the scene until relatively late in the lifespan of video games as a medium. For a long time, farming RPGs occupied a comfortable niche, and then they burst onto the main scene in such a way that invited scores of copycats. The fact is, farming RPGs proved many gamers enjoy more relaxed experiences built around an addictive gameplay loop. While no one can know for sure what the future of farming games are or what games they will inspire, it is clear that developers are far more inclined to add slow-paced elements to their games because of them. Text-based games of the 60s and 70s opened the door. Harvest Moon brought everything together in the 90s, and in 2013, Stardew Valley perfected the formula. Someday, we're gonna see a game come along that will take things to the next level. I can't tell you what that game will be like, but given the fact that I've bought Stardew Valley 4 times across just as many systems and put several hundred hours into it, I can promise I'll be there playing it for weeks on end. Hey, before you go, this is my last video of 2025. I should have another one coming in January of next year, but I just want to say thanks for checking it out. If you like this content, feel free to check out some other content that I've made right here, or feel free to like, subscribe, or let me know in the comments what you like about farming RPGs and where you think the genre is going to go. I should have another video in about a month, and I want to thank you all for making this a great 2025. See you guys in the next year, and hope you have a great one. Thanks.